Deputy Ivana Bacik.
On behalf of the Labour Party, following the horrific death of Aisling Murphy, the horrific killing of Aisling Murphy in Tullamore, County Offaly last week. And I want to begin by expressing my heartfelt sympathies and condolences to Aisling Murphy's family, to her partner and friends, and to her community, the school that she worked in, and all of those who knew her. There has been an immense outpouring of grief nationally at the loss of such a wonderful young woman, with tens of thousands of people attending vigils both in Ireland and indeed abroad. But her killing has also generated an immense outpouring not only of grief but of anger at the extent to which all women are subjected to violence or to fear of violence. It has reminded us of so many other horrific killings of women in this country. This Thursday marks 1 year since the violent attack on Éireann Serandorj, not far from here at the IFSC, and our thoughts are with her family and friends as we approach that anniversary, and indeed our thoughts are with the family and friends of other women and girls killed so horrifically and whose names have been spoken in this chamber, including Anna Creagil and Justine Valdez. Aisling's killing reminds us that, as Women's Aid have reported, 244 women have died violently since 1996, 152 killed in their own homes. And it has also served to remind us of the extent to which all women and girls are daily subjected to harassment, abuse, violence and assault by men. And indeed, in recent days, we've had an outpouring of women's experiences, of stories being recounted. And what's perhaps most surprising, certainly for me and I think for many of us in this chamber, is the extent to which our good male colleagues have often been unaware of the extent to which we experience everyday sexism and microaggressions. Because while such violence is of course only perpetrated by a small number of men, the fear of violence is experienced by all women. And all of us who've grown up and live in this culture have become so accustomed to changing our behaviour, to assessing risk on a daily basis, to modifying our movements all of the time because of this fear, that we simply don't question it anymore. It's become it's become something that's unconscious to us. We all check ourselves every day, this mental checklist that other colleagues have spoken of. Everywhere we go, is it safe to walk or cycle down this street, to get into this taxi, to jog in this park or along this canal? And this is this sort of daily checking, this constant need to engage in risk monitoring is instilled in us from an early age, and it has taken a horrific killing like that of Aisling Murphy last week to remind us that it's not acceptable that we've put up with this for so long, and that we're seeing our own teenage daughters, and I'm a mother of teenage daughters, that we're seeing our own daughters also taking on this risk monitoring, this unconscious fear. It's simply not acceptable that women and girls in our society continue to experience this fear, to continue to engage in this constant checking and risk monitoring. This must be a watershed moment, and many have said that, but I think we're seeing a growing realisation among men and boys that men and boys need to step up to challenge sexism and to challenge that culture in which misogyny and sexism is tolerated, in which men and boys continue to engage in public places in sexist or misogynistic jeering, catcalling, harassment or groping of women and girls. We've seen studies today showing teenage girls have all but stopped cycling in Ireland because of fear, largely because of a fear of harassment. So it's time to engage in a radical culture shift, to adopt that policy of zero tolerance against violence against women, against misogyny in all its forms. We know the common strand is a strand of gender inequality, and we see this worldwide. And in my role as chairperson of the Special Committee on Gender Equality established by the Oireachtas just before Christmas, Ceann Comhairle, I'll be working with colleagues on a cross-party basis to see the implementation of the important recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly, 45 recommendations to tackle gender inequality, 5 of which refer specifically to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And here's what we need to do to build on those recommendations urgently. First, we need a Cabinet Minister, and I'm glad the Minister for Justice is going to be that Minister, to take the lead in coordinating and implementing all strategies to prevent and counter violence against women. And I believe, Minister, that you need to publish that promised strategy urgently, and I know you've committed to doing so, the strategy on gender-based violence, but also expedite the publication of the data that we so badly need to build on the Savvy data from 2002. And I think we also need, in parallel with that, to see the rolling out of a public awareness campaign focused on prevention and education for children in all schools through the RSE programme without any opt-out, no matter what the ethos of the school, but a parallel public awareness programme for adults too, to challenge misogyny and sexism in all its forms. And of course, as well as that, we do need to see the implementation of those criminal justice reforms recommended in the O'Malley report and committed to through Supporting a Victim's Journey by the Department of Justice. Two things that jump out from the O'Malley report: the fragmentation of services for victims across the country and the lack of a voice for victim in the courtroom. And I think that's something, Minister, that we'll need to see really serious work on over the coming months, to see legislation put forward that increases the levels of representation for the victim in the courtroom, and that indeed addresses that real fragmentation of services, addresses inadequate supports in particular for victims of domestic violence and the lack of shelter provision. And we know that the Istanbul Convention requirements we have still fallen short of. So we need a fundamental change of emphasis to address not only the criminal justice system flaws, to build on the changes we have made that are positive around the COCO's law, around the introduction of the coercive control offence and the definition of consent. We need to see more legislation that tackles existing gaps in the system, but more particularly we need to focus on the education, on the cultural change, and we need to recognise that given the gender imbalance in this House, where less than a quarter of us are women, that we have to ask male colleagues in particular to be aware of the unconscious bias that persists through our system, to be aware of the chilling effect on women and girls of sexism, misogyny, mansplaining, sexist comments, exclusion and the other microaggressions that far too many women and girls are continuing to endure day in, day out. I think it falls to all of us, Count Corla, women and men in this House and beyond, to take a stand against sexism, to take responsibility for ensuring that ours is a safe country for all women and girls, and that it is also an equal country in which we stand up to sexism and to misogyny in all its forms.
Thank you very much, Deputy.